Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be toiling up some Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. This was for sure one of the books I actually owned first got from the library. Despite this, I didn't really remember anything about it before revisiting it this week. I knew it had a mummy in it because, well, obviously. There was no TV episode to accompany this book, but I'll explain how I solved that later. When looking at the cover, I think I know why I ended up purchasing this book, because it's pretty obviously going to have something to do with an actual monster in it. This cover actually matches the plot, and I wasn't disappointed by a lack of mummies. I think the highlight here is the red glowing eyes on the mummy. Like, a regular mummy is bad enough, but you really don't want to see his eyes glowing. And I think I was also just drawn to the overall color scheme. I just think it looks nice. When looking at the 2003 version, they decided to go with this ugly teal slime for the border, and I consider the cover a downgrade largely because of that. The 2009 version just looks stupid. I'm sorry, but it does. What happened to this mummy's face? Why does he look like a deformed cat? It's also just so yellow. And I'm biased because I just don't love warm colors, and yellow's the worst of it. Hard pass. The front tag says, "What will wake the dead?" And I think this one works pretty great. It hints at the plot and makes me want to read further. The back tag says, "Something dead has been here." And this one kind of just confuses me because I don't really know what it's going for. Usually these are like a play on a common saying or an idiom, but I don't know what this one's referring to. Maybe I'm just being dumb and it will be obvious in hindsight, but I don't get it. As far as merchandise goes, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb had quite a bit more than I was expecting. This may be due to a mummy being an iconic horror monster in its own right. Curse of the Mummy's Tomb had the basics like notebooks and folders. It also had a cool little flashlight keychain, a hologram mummy necklace, this awesome mummy picture frame with light up eyes and creepy noises, and of course, a pog. Before doing the beat-by-beat summary, let's read the blurb on the back. Gabe just got lost in a pyramid. One minute, his crazy cousin Sari was right ahead of him in the pyramid tunnel. The next minute, she's disappeared. But Gabe isn't alone. Someone else is in the pyramid too. Someone or something. Gabe doesn't believe in the curse of the mummy's tomb. But that doesn't mean the curse isn't real, does it? Alright, now that that's done, on to the summary. The book begins with our introduction to Gabe, who's a thirsty bitch. This isn't surprising considering he happens to be in Egypt outside the Great Pyramid. Gabe's parents have no time for his complaints though, and they give no shits their child is thirsty. How dare he be thirsty in the actual desert? Gabe's mom tells him, "We can't get you a drink now, stop acting like you're 4. To which Gabe replies, 12-year-olds get thirsty too. That's right, Gabe, hit her with the facts. His mom then says, "Look at the pyramid. That's why we're here. We didn't come here to get a drink." Damn, Mom, I didn't realize that this was a one or the other type situation. Gabe goes for the dramatics, which I fully support, and begins to claim that he's choking. Gabe tries begging his father for water, which also goes nowhere because his dad is too preoccupied with reading about facts about the pyramid from his guidebook. This guy is gonna love Wikipedia someday. Gabe then resorts to teasing his dad about being fat because Dad's a little sensitive about his weight, so I try to tease him about it as often as I can. This is a family dynamic I can get behind. Gabe's dad begins to quiz him on how the pyramids were built, which is a trick question because obviously the answer is aliens. We then learn that the family is there to sell refrigeration equipment and to visit their Uncle Ben, who's a famous archaeologist who's even been featured in National Geographic. We also learn that Gabe and his family are of Egyptian descent, so they're all reflecting on their ancestors by looking at this big old pyramid. Gabe spots some camels and seizes the opportunity to tell this joke. How do you get down from a camel? You don't, you get down from a duck. I wonder if Stein just kept a joke book handy when writing these things. Gabe is hopeful that his famous uncle's connections could possibly get him inside that pyramid, because that would be outstanding, but his parents don't think it works that way. The dad drops his guidebook at one point, and we remark on how he doesn't like to bend over to get things, because his stomach gets in the way. He's kind of like the dad from Welcome to Dead House, who couldn't get out from behind the steering wheel, or keep his shirt tucked in, because fat. We get a little teaser at the end of the chapter where Gabe lets us know that at some point he'll be inside that pyramid and possibly sealed in it forever. And I kind of hope so, because that sounds like a good direction to take this story. We switch scenes, and now Gabe is riding around in a car that is surprisingly not a station wagon. We also get our best Jiggy's 90 moment, because Gabe is attempting to play his Game Boy while ignoring the family vacation, like a true 90s kid. After all, a river is just a river in regards to the Nile. They return to the hotel, and finally by page 9, Gabe gets a drink. This kid was parched. We then get reference to Gabe's Cocker Spaniel at home, Elvis, making this the third Cocker Spaniel so far. I kind of wonder if Stein has a Cocker Spaniel himself, because I would definitely fill my stories of bloodhounds if given the chance. Gabe's favorite part of Egypt so far is that the Coke tastes the same as it does in the US, so Gabe might not be a man of culture. The parents get an important refrigeration phone call, and they have to fly to Alexandria within the hour. This must be some customer, meaning that Gabe won't get to see the pyramids with his Uncle Ben after all. Gabe is rightfully pissed, but lucky for him, Uncle Ben ends up offering to watch him for the week. The only downside is that Gabe's stuck-up cousin Sari will also be there. Apparently Sari is 12 years old too, and a snob because she attends boarding school in the US. Her other crimes include being pretty, smart, an inch taller than Gabe, and she can get to the last level of Super Mario Land on the Super Nintendo. So she sounds just awful. Gabe's parents engage in some great parenting and leave Gabe alone in the hotel room to wait for his Uncle Ben to come get him. This makes Gabe nervous, so he tries to play Tetris on his Game Boy as a distraction, but the lighting is too shit. For those of you too young to remember the original Game Boys, the lighting struggle was real. Like, I even had one of these contraptions just so I could see. Also, the amount of batteries that life required back then was no joke. Gabe casually mentions his good luck charm in his pocket, which you might be surprised to learn is the hand of a dead child. Yes, Gabe found a child's mummified hand at a garage sale and carries it around as a good luck charm now.
What?
Gabe caresses the dead hand to calm his nerves and reflects on how the kid who sold it to him for $2 said it was a summoner and that it was used to summon evil spirits or something. Why the was this just lying around at a yard sale? Gabe continues to play with the corpse hand as he waits, but I guess like using it as a good luck charm is better than eating it, which is what Victorian era people used to use for medicine sometimes. Cause yeah, eating old corpses is definitely gonna make you feel better. Humans are a wild bunch. Suddenly, without any warning, the door begins to open and in a chapter cliffhanger, a mummy is suddenly standing in the doorway in all its bandaged glory. This of course just ends up being Uncle Ben, playing a little prank on his nephew, but I love that this man wrapped himself up and strolled into the hotel to do this prank. That's dedication, and it's much better than our other Goosebumps pranks, where somebody just shouts from another room for help. Gabe channels his inner Bart Simpson and says he was so scared he practically had a cow. Sari is eating this up and Gabe resents her for it, more than his Uncle Ben who actually did the mummying. Sari then updates Gabe on Uncle Ben's life and lets him know that a new burial chamber has been discovered in the pyramid, and that Uncle Ben gets to explore it. Gabe thinks this is outstanding. And Gabe loves this word, so now I do too. I'm definitely going to work it into my everyday lexicon. They have dinner downstairs, and Gabe's inferiority complex continues as he gets mad at Sari for being able to read Arabic for some reason. Uncle Ben spends 2 pages giving us a lesson on the pyramids that I hope you all learned in 6th grade like me. They are hoping this new chamber belongs to Pharaoh Khufu, and the best part is that Gabe gets to go in there too with his uncle. The next morning, the trio enter the pyramid, and I personally think this is the creepiest sequence so far in the Goosebumps books, because my claustrophobic ass would never crawl into a tunnel like this. The idea of getting stuck or lost is enough for me to be content just looking at the pictures online. I don't need to go in there myself. Gabe continues on his jealousy journey with Sari by resenting her for knowing more about the pyramids than him, and to make up for this, he insists on going down the rope ladder before her. Gabe is shocked that the rope ladder is rough feeling, and proceeds just to let go in a chapter cliffhanger as he's falling into the darkness. Sari, of course, saves him at the last second by grabbing him, and then Gabe resents her for it. They continue their journey into the pyramid, and Gabe, for the second time in this story, has to tie his left shoe, which we learn comes untied all the time. And how much do you want to bet that this shoe gets his stupid ass lost in this pyramid? In the chamber, we meet Ahmed, who's from university and keeps warning everybody about curses that have been activated since the chamber was opened. And considering this is Goosebumps, someone should listen to Ahmed. Sari suddenly wants to go tunnel exploring while Uncle Ben gets lost in his work. This would have gotten a big fat nope out of me, but Sari convinces Gage by appealing to his established character trait of insecurity by continuing to call him a chicken and clucking at him. Immediately into their journey, Sari ends up racing ahead of Gabe, and of course he has to stop and tie his shoe. This leads to a chapter cliffhanger where Gabe realizes he doesn't know where he's at or where Sari is. Gabe realizes Sari's just probably trying to scare him and reflects on the time he tried to scare her by taking her to an old haunted house. This of course backfired on him massively, because we've established that Sari is just better than Gabe, and he ended up being the one who was terrified. Gage keeps his cool in his search for Sari. Just kidding, he freaks the out. Gabe runs around panicking to himself until he comes across a sarcophagus, or as Gabe calls it, a mummy case. Gotta keep that reading level low. Suddenly, the lid starts to move, and in a chapter cliffhanger, Gabe thinks he's about to get murdered by a mummy. This is obviously just Sari, who then taunts the poor dumb boy mercilessly. Gabe fondles his child cadaver hand for comfort, while Sari continues to mock him. I'm not an archaeologist, but I don't think he should be crawling around on ancient items. Who knows? Maybe that's not obvious. Uncle Ben appears and he is pissed, because there are hundreds and possibly thousands of tunnels for them to get lost in. But he seems unbothered about Sari playing in the sarcophagus, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. Who knows? They leave the pyramid and we cut to the next morning, where Uncle Ben informs them they will be spending the day at the museum with him. This causes Sari to channel her inner Evan from Monster Blood by muttering, "thrills and chills," at the prospect of going to a museum. I'm a nerd because that sounds like a great day to me. Gabe wants to save a Frosted Flakes box because it has Tony the Tiger saying something on it in Arabic, but he thinks Sari will make fun of him for it, and he resents her for his own insecurity for the 100th time. We have a sudden change of plans because 2 of the archaeologists have come down with a sudden sickness, and Uncle Ben needs to go visit them in the hospital, so he leaves the 2 kids to hang out in the hotel room alone. Immediately, Sari suggests they leave the hotel, and Gabe decides, I'll be the macho guy. No repeats of yesterday, ever again. And suggests that they head over to the museum as planned earlier. They leave a note to let Uncle Ben know about their whereabouts, and then they wander off into the city. Gabe marvels at the locals, and they make it to the museum without much fanfare. At the museum, they explore the mummy room, and Gabe delights in describing the mummy-making process to Sari. He tells her in graphic detail about the removal of the corpse's brain through the nose and how they keep the organs in jars. He gets Sari really close to our vomit count, but before we can reach the grand finale, the kids spot Ahmed from earlier. They don't like the looks of Ahmed, so when he comes towards them, they take off running. A chase ensues, and we end on a chapter cliffhanger where Ahmed gets them cornered. Of course, it turns out Ahmed has just been sent by their father to take them back to the hotel. However, when they're leaving the museum, Ahmed becomes weirdly insistent that they get in his car and drive to the hotel. These kids don't know enough about stranger danger, and they end up getting in. The best part of this, though, is that Ahmed is driving a station wagon, so Stein got his station wagon after all. We end the chapter with the kids realizing they're being kidnapped as Ahmed drives away in the opposite direction of the hotel. The kids actually use their brains, and when Ahmed slows down to stop, they hop out of the car and lose Ahmed in the crowds. They then realize that they're lost and settle on hopping in a cab to get back to the hotel, which is not a bad plan at all. The next issue is that they hop into a cab with a crazy driver, who for reasons unexplained, just keeps laughing hysterically at the mention of the Cairo Center Hotel in an odd chapter cliffhanger choice. Turns out that the hotel is right across the street, which is why the driver thought it was so funny, to the point that the man was literally crying over it. You do you, I guess. They reach the hotel and inform Uncle Ben that Ahmed is trying to kidnap them. He's fairly nonchalant about this for some reason, and is kind of like, he had good credentials. We also learn that 2 of the workers in the hospital are in a state of shock and unable to speak. It's kind of like they've been scared senseless. Uncle Ben wants to figure out what happened to his 2 workers, so at first he intends to leave these 2 kids alone in the hotel again while he investigates the pyramid. Right after they were almost kidnapped, the kids point out to him that this is a terrible idea, and he settles on bringing them to the pyramid with him. Once at the pyramid, Uncle Ben sticks trackers on the kids, so he can locate them in case they get lost, and I guess we just didn't need those the first trip for some reason. For the 4th time in this story, Gabe stops to tie his shoe, and we get a repeat chapter cliffhanger where suddenly he can't find Uncle Ben or Sari. Either these 2 are hauling ass through these tunnels, or it takes Gabe an extremely long time to tie his shoes. Because these 2 have managed to vanish to the point he can't even hear them in an abandoned, echoey pyramid. Gabe once again goes into panic mode and does the opposite of what you should do when you're lost by running wildly at random. He considers using his beeper for its intended purpose, but he doesn't want Sari to make fun of him for getting lost. So once again, Gabe lets his insecurity make the situation worse. Gabe, just accept that Sari is cooler than you. You will encounter this many times in your life. As he continues to wander around without purpose, he suddenly falls through the damn floor into another chamber. In this chamber, he gains consciousness and realizes he's basically face to face with a mummy. This is understandably not a pleasant moment for the boy. He realizes that it's not just one mummy, but a shit ton of mummies all over the room. It also appears that he's in a room that was like a mummy making factory with all the necessary supplies and a strange black pool in the center of the room. Gabe decides he's had enough of this, and when he goes to press the beeper, he realizes that he's crushed it in his fall. Stein dedicates a lot of time describing how nasty this room smells, and I appreciate it because I can't imagine a room full of old dead bodies smells great. Gabe then full on loses his shit and begins screaming for help. He gets so worked up that he drops his flashlight as he feels things brushing past his ankles. He stumbles around crunching on whatever's surrounding him, and once he gets his flashlight, he realizes the room is also full of scorpions. Gabe freaks himself out to the point where he begins to fall over right into a nest of them, when in a chapter cliffhanger surprise, a pair of hands suddenly catch him. The hands of course end up being Sari's, and Gabe manages for once to be thankful for his cousin's help. It turns out she managed to get lost from Uncle Ben in the search for Gabe. They admire the room for a bit, and then they realize, oh yeah, we should probably use our beeper so Uncle Ben knows where he can find us. After activating Sari's beeper, someone appears, and it's not Uncle Ben. And of course, in an end of chapter fashion, it's Ahmed. Ahmed proceeds to go on an evil villain rant where he explains his motivations and goals. It turns out that he scared the other 2 workers senseless by showing them how it might feel to be boiled alive in tar. And it's not like that wouldn't be scary, but I doubt it'd be scary enough to send 2 people into shock. Like, he didn't injure these people, he just talked about doing it. Pretty sure at the hospital I'd be able to say, yeah, Ahmed said he'd boil me in tar for violating the chamber. Like, I wouldn't just be sitting there in shock, unable to inform anybody of anything. Ahmed is apparently some sort of descendant of the priestess, and it's his job to protect the chamber. He tried kidnapping the kids because he thought that would scare Uncle Ben off, which sounds logical. Ahmed then declares that he has no choice but to carry out the curse, which means turning these 2 kids into mummies while they're still alive. And that the mummies in this chamber are actually fairly recent additions, whether they be grave robbers or other explorers. I like that this man and his ancestors have been operating this mummy room for thousands of years without anybody noticing or coming across the room. As Ahmed is explaining his evil plans, a rope ladder just drops down from the ceiling and Uncle Ben appears on the scene. He tries to reason with Ahmed, scientist to scientist, but Ahmed knocks his ass out with a torch to the head, but Stein makes sure to let us know that Uncle Ben was not set aflame, he's just unconscious. Ahmed drags Uncle Ben into a mummy case and shuts him on in. He then tells our 2 heroes to crawl into one too, as he waits for the tar to boil. Sari crawls in, and because Gabe is a damaged boy. He notices that she still has to be first. Once sealed in this extremely large case that is big enough for them both to lie down if they feel like it, they begin to contemplate their violent upcoming deaths when suddenly they realize it's not just the two of them inside that case, but that there's somebody else moving around in there too. But since this is a chapter cliffhanger, on the next page, we learn that somehow Uncle Ben is in the case with them. Apparently, ancient Egyptians created these escape hatches in the tombs so that the souls could leave. This works out very conveniently for our plot, because now all of our heroes are reunited. They decide to crawl out, but the kids are scared that Ahmed is still out there and that he will see them. But Uncle Ben assures them that he won't, because when he was crawling out of his case, Ahmed was nowhere to be found. And I guess I just really don't get how these cases work. Why didn't he just open the lid on Sari's and Gabe's case? Why did he crawl through some secret door in the back then? Instead of crawling up the rope ladder to escape, Uncle Ben declares that it will take too long and they must go out the tunnel. So it's no surprise when they immediately run into Ahmed in the tunnel. This was so obviously going to happen that they didn't even bother with the chapter cliffhanger. Ahmed now decides that they aren't worthy of being mummies anymore, and instead he's going to throw them in the burning tar pit. Uncle Ben keeps trying to talk scientist to scientist because he struggles to accept that Ahmed is out of his damn mind. Uncle Ben then also decides that risking being stabbed by a little dagger is scarier than being boiled alive in tar with his daughter and nephew, so he willingly walks them all back to the tar pit. Uncle Ben, it's a stab wound versus having your flesh melted off. It should not be a hard decision. Once in front of the tar pit, Gabe decides to pull out his summoner mummy hand and hold it like the Statue of Liberty. And to his dismay, nothing happens in the chapter ending. Ahmed is then all of a sudden scared shitless and declares that it's the hand of the priestess. And suddenly the mummies around the room start moving. The mummies circle him, and one gets set on fire but grabs him anyways. Stein then describes how the other mummies are helping their burning colleague, and Ahmed gets hoisted up by the throat over the burning tar pit. But since this is a children's book, instead of tossing his evil ass in, the mummy lets him go and Ahmed just takes off out of the chamber scared. Maybe that's why there's a sequel to this book? We wrap this up in the next 3 pages. They all return to the hotel to have a nice big dinner and relive their adventure. Gabe is pleased that he finally did something better than Sari, and Uncle Ben remains amazed at Gabe's good luck charm. The next morning, they're all having breakfast in the hotel room, and Gabe decides to mess around with the summoner by pretending to summon the dead again. Suddenly there's a scraping sound outside the door, and in a Goosebumps non-twist first, it's actually just Gabe's parents, and we end the book on a positive note for the first time. And that's it. That's the end. This is the first book to throw me through a loop and not have a direct episode pairing. The sequel, The Mummy Returns, has an episode in the first season of Goosebumps, so I don't want to watch that one and spoil the book, so instead I'll spoil something else. My plan has been for the books without episodes, it was that I was just going to watch an episode from the TV series that doesn't have a direct pairing from the original 62 books. But lucky for me, there just so happens to be another Mummy episode called Don't Wake Mummy from Season 2, Episode 22. This is an adaptation of a short story from the 3rd book of the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series. I don't really have any intentions of ever reading the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series, so I don't mind spoiling it for myself. If this bothers you, just skip to the totals. And then since this doesn't have anything to do with our current book, I'll read the episode blurb. When Jeff Carter's dad sends a creepy 4,000-year-old mummy home from one of his archaeological digs, Jeff is horrified. But when Jeff sees the mummy, with its hideous shrunken face covered in rotting bandages, rise from the sarcophagus in the basement, no one will believe him, especially not his obnoxious sister Kim, who thinks he's the biggest wimp that's ever lived. This episode starts out strong, with Jeff resenting his sister Kim for being braver than him, just kind of like Gabe's irrational jealousy of Sari. It also opens with Jeff being abnormally afraid of a toy spider. Like, this kid just straight up starts thrashing. The family has a mummy delivered to their door from their father in Egypt, and I'm not sure this is legal. The episode also delivers on a shoulder scare.
Still a coffin with a dead body inside.
I'm not sure how Kim pulled this off without Jeff noticing, but he really doesn't seem like the hardest kid to fool. Sorry, Jeff. The episode makes sure to explain in detail why they can't just send the mummy to the museum, and Kim is stoked to have a dead body in the house. Side note, what is this family eating? We get the mom out of the way so we can have some unsupervised mummy antics. They're also very casual about having a jar of old organs on the kitchen table by the pizza. Kim also describes moving the brain in a section that's very similar to the Curse of the Mummy's tomb.
What do you think's in his jar? Gold, maybe?
Probably his guts or something. They cut out their heart
And liver and stuff?
and stored in little jars.
Gross!
The best part is the brain. They pick it out through their nose with this big hook thing.
Kim, stop. You're making me sick.
I think Jeff is the most easily scared character so far, although it's pretty apparent this movie within a TV episode is going to show us how to defeat the mummy. In this episode, the sister Kim deserves to be an asshole victim because she has no chill. They open up that mummy box and they find a mummy who looks pretty gross.
Doesn't look so scary.
I disagree, Kim. He looks scary to me. I do like the inclusion of a mummy cat too. Kim is a straight up asshole and locks little Jeff in the basement with the mummy in the dark. I like that once the mummy's up and moving though, he makes little puffs of smoke like Snoop Mummy. After effectively traumatizing Jeff, the two girls reseal the mummy unaware that he's alive. I also kind of love that Jeff attacks his mom out of fear.
Get away! What's the matter?
Kim finally explains her motive for why she's such an unrelenting asshole.
Why do you hate him so much?
I don't hate him. He's just a wimp, that's all. And wimps get what they ask for.
Since Jeff hasn't been through enough, his mom makes him sit downstairs with it as she reads hieroglyphics, where we learn that this mummy is actually a killer mummy who murdered his brother to become pharaoh. Later that night, while the mom updates the father in Egypt on her discovery, Kim wanders around the house and into Jeff's room, looking to further traumatize him. I also like that she just happens to have an elaborate mummy costume laying around. When he finally snaps and hops on top of her, I was hoping he'd for a proper bully beatdown, like in A Christmas Story.
I have since heard of people under extreme duress speaking in strange tongues. I became conscious that a steady torrent of obscenities.
Once the kids get sent to the room, the actual mummy appears, and for some reason, Jeff decides to save his sister, even though the mom straight up abandons both of the kids. Jeff suddenly becomes a hero and runs around with the heart jar, because I guess that if the mummy gets his heart, he'll become a living human again, and everybody agrees that that's worse than a zombie for some reason. The heart ends up falling in the garbage disposal, and everybody just watches versus helping Jeff as he fights the mummy alone. The heart gets blended and it's great. The mummy's defeated, and then the episode throws in a great twist with a sudden appearance of the mummy cat. I enjoy this episode quite a bit. It kind of makes me wonder if the short stories are easier to adapt than the actual books, so maybe I'll actually have to look into these short stories after all. In general, I really enjoyed The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. I thought the characters were fine overall, despite Gabe's inferiority complex and potential future incel vibes. The strength of this book lies in its actual plot. I thought it effectively created some creepy settings, claustrophobic scenes, and we had actual mummies running around. There's really not much more you can ask for from a Goosebumps book, so I'll give this one 5 out of 5 outstanding little baby scorpions. Alright, now let's jump into our Goosebumps totals. We don't have any It's Only a Dreams, shoulder scares, or asshole victims, but we do have quite a few 90s moments. In Getting Jiggy with the 90s, we had 9 90s moments. I just said 9 like 5 times. These included Silly Putty, Indiana Jones, Game Boys, saying barf, Super Mario Land, Super Nintendo, bad lighting for Game Boy play, a station wagon, and the slang having a cow. This brings our series total to 38 jiggy 90s moments. As per usual, vomit count remains at 0, but we did get our closest so far with Sari getting close to puking at the idea of mummy brain removal. She turns green, but she fails to spill the goods. We had 2 It's a Prank Bros. The first one, Uncle Ben dresses up as a mummy to scare Gabe in the hotel, and the second one, Sari desecrates a tomb by hiding inside of it to get Gabe. This brings us up to 7 It's a Prank Bros. The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb had a total of 13 chapter cliffhangers. Overall, these cliffhangers weren't bad, unlike, say, Cheese and Die. This raises our total to 75. The clunky cliffhanger award for this book goes to chapters 9 to 10 with the Laughing Cabbie. It just doesn't make much sense and it's kinda stupid. Like, this man goes into hysterics over the hotel being right there. It's like, haha, fuck you stupid kids. Shocker ending. There was no twist ending to this one. In fact, I would say this is our first solidly happy ending so far. No cliffhangers, no twists, just his parents returning and everything is hunky-dory. This leaves our series total at 3. Well, that's it for our first Mummy book. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I was expecting to. Like, sometimes these books kind of drag by the midpoint, but this one kept me pretty engaged throughout. I'm curious to see what happens in the sequel, since the only thing I can think of is maybe that Ahmed returns. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the Curse of the Mummies 2 in the comments. Would you buy a dead child's hand from a garage sale? Also, what did you think of my mummy clips? Anyways, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,